Alrighty, guys, in patch 2610, Riot is not trying to flip the meta on its head. They are making targeted, intentional adjustments while keeping the overall game state stable. Mid-season changes are generally unpopular with the player base, and Riot does seem aware of that. So the narrative for this patch is Zeri's rework. So she is designed to be a hyper carry, a marksman who starts off relatively weak but becomes a really strong powerhouse in the late game, and the buffs here are specifically tuned to reinforce that scaling identity. So if you're playing Zeri, the late game is about to feel a lot more rewarding. Now, Lee Sin is getting some changes as well, specifically to his W. The overall change is just to make his kit feel cleaner, not necessarily more powerful. So if you do main Lee Sin, go ahead and stay tuned for those changes. On the item and rune side, Doran's bow and Doran's helm are both getting buffed to encourage a little bit more variety in starting items. And then two things that are not in this patch but are coming soon is that Cyclo Sword is considered to be too strong on both Zed and Neferi. We called this out on our tier list video that we made a couple days ago. These two are Giga S plus tier right now, so that will be getting adjusted here in the future. And there'll also be some changes in the future to how the synergy between Black Cleaver and Deathfire Touch works, because that's actually a deadly combo right now, and it is snowballing games in a way that Riot did not intend. So let's start out with buffs. So starting out with Ambessa, so she's getting a buff to her in-combat damage output, specifically to her Q, and this is around her percentage max HP damage. So at early ranks, this nearly doubles, going from 2 to 6% up to 4 to 6%, which means she'll be threatening tanks and bruisers much more reliably in the mid-game when her Q is still leveled low. And her healing output did receive a bump as well, making her more self-sufficient during extended team fights. Now, on the flip side, Riot is deliberately pulling back her jungle viability. Her Q bonus monster damage drops from 125 to 75, and her R healing effectiveness against monsters is nearly cut in half from 40% to 25%. The intent is clearly to push her back towards the top lane and away from the jungle, where she's apparently been functioning a little too well. This is a clean targeted change, stronger in lane and weaker in jungle. Now, Galio changes are modest, but add up nicely for mage forward builds. So his Q is getting cheaper across all ranks. 70 to 90 mana is now being scaled down to 60 to 80 mana. So that is a quality of life improvement that lets him spam his wave clear a little bit more freely in lane without burning through his mana bar too quickly. Also his E, so his E damage sees a tweak in shape rather than just raw numbers. So the base damage at early ranks goes up slightly, 90 to 100 at rank 1. The AP ratio is bumped up as well from 90% to 100%. And the max rank damage is actually scaled down a little from 250 to 240. So overall, this is an early game buff as well as a late game buff as well. Really, I would say more of a late game buff. When you really start to stack all those AP items, that's where you'll see this AP ratio really start to become noticeable in your damage output. And then also his ultimate has some new scaling, and I'd say this is the most interesting change. So it now scales with 100% of his bonus magic resistance. So this rewards Galio players who are leaning into stacking MR items by translating that defensive investment into an actual kill threat on his ultimate. So instead of just being like a tanky utility team fighter, you actually will have some kill threat against AP mages, the main thing that you counter. Up next, we have Wukong. So Wukong, we are seeing some changes to his W, his decoy clone ability, and it's getting a meaningful buff on both the damage it deals and how long it sticks around. So the clone's damage goes from 30 to 50 to 40 to 60, and its duration increases from 3.25 seconds up to 4 seconds. His E is also getting a small attack speed boost from 35 to 55% up to 40 to 60%, which synergizes pretty nicely with his Q and overall auto attack pattern. You know, Wukong has always wanted to stick to targets and just kind of brawl, and these changes push him further in that direction. Now, probably the highlight of the patch here, we have Zeri. So she's getting some buffs to her Q base damage from 2133 up to 2238. So that will really help her in the early game. That's going to give her better wave clear, better poke overall, and it'll allow her to scale more aggressively into the mid and late game as well. Secondly, her excess attack speed to AD conversion ratio increases from 50% to 60%. So Zeri has a unique mechanic where attack speed beyond her cap converts into bonus AD instead of just being wasted. So this change makes that conversion now more efficient, meaning AD centric and attack speed heavy builds both get more mileage out of the stack. Thirdly, and most significantly, a bug fix is correcting how long her ultimate extends when she attacks during it. So currently, each attack extends this by 1.5 seconds per attack. That's going up to 2.5 seconds per attack. So that is a full additional second of uptime per attack, which completely changes how long she can stay in her supercharged state during a team fight. I mean, it's literally about a 75% buff on this specific mechanic on her ult, and really, it's a bug fix more than anything. Okay, let's talk a little bit about champion nerfs. So Anivia has been playing unusually tanky for a champion whose identity is that of a control mage. The fix is pretty straightforward. Shave off some armor. Her base armor drops from 21 to 19, and her armor growth per level falls from 4.5 to 4.1. Over a full game, this adds up to a noticeable reduction in her physical durability, making her a bit more punishable by AD champions. Up next is Ashe. So Ashe's Q has been a little bit oppressive at higher ranks, specifically in extended fights when she's autoing quickly and stacking the slow. So the AD ratio at max ranks gets trimmed from 140% down to 130%, which just softens the damage ceiling without touching her utility or her early to mid game. She's still a really strong bot laner. This just tones down the late game power spike slightly. The Fury is getting hit in a couple big waves, so her passive monster modifier is being reduced from 155% to 145%, which directly impacts her jungle clear speed and efficiency. And less importantly on its own, but more disruptive in practice, her W mana cost changes from a flat 60 mana at all ranks to a scaling cost that starts at 85 mana and reduces as you level it down to 65. This means early game, before she's had a chance to level W, will burn through mana much faster if she uses it often. It is a punish for reckless W usage in the early jungle and makes her feel the cost of her tools more acutely. Up next is Shyvana. So Shyvana gets 2 small durability and uptime cuts. So her HP per level drops from 100 to 95, which translates to about 85 less HP by level 18. So not dramatic, but meaningful in those close skirmishes. And her W cooldown at later ranks gets extended slightly. So the minimum goes from 9 seconds to 10 seconds, which means she'll have slightly less sustained damage output in prolonged fights, and this will impact her clear speed a little as well. They aren't devastating nerfs, but they are tightening a champion a bit who has been performing a bit above where Riot wants her. And then Zed is getting tapped in 2 places while Riot keeps an eye on Cyclo Sword, which is actually his bigger problem, and that, again, is going to be addressed in a future patch. So his E damage loses some scaling, the bonus AD ratio drops from 80 to 70%, and the max rank base damage falls from 170 to 160. Now, more notably, his passive max HP damage gets shaved at early levels. The level 1 to 2 damage drops from 6% down to 5%, and then level 2, 8% down to 7.5%, and max rank will stay the same. So this is a direct nerf to his early all-in and lethality builds that were letting him delete targets before they could respawn. He's still Zed, but the I'm level 6 and you're already dead moment should happen a bit less. Okay, up next we have some champion adjustments. So this is probably the most complex set of changes in the patch and deserves a decent explanation here. So his W changes are going to be the centerpiece. The shield value does get a slight reduction across all ranks. So 70, 115, 160, 205, 250 now goes down to 60, 105, 150, 195, 240. So 10 at all ranks essentially, which is really just a minor nerf. However, the bigger quality of life change is that the cooldown is now a flat 7 seconds, regardless of whether you use W to a champion, a ward, or a minion. Previously, the cooldown varied dependent on what you jumped to, which was a source of a lot of confusion and inconsistency. Now it's very simple and it's very predictable. Now, even more importantly, Lisa now gains the shield himself when jumping to a ward or minion. So previously, only the target got the shield, meaning if you ward hopped or minion jumped, you didn't get any defensive value. This was a bit counterintuitive and penalized Lee for using W creatively. Now he always gets the shield on himself, which makes the ability feel much more cohesive and reliable. His E also takes a small AD scaling nerf, 100% down to 90%, which is a pretty big reduction, but he did get so much utility from his W that they're trying to level the playing field by taking off some damage from his E. And then his ultimate also gets a pretty funny fix, to be honest. So if you get the killing blow with your ultimate, it would not knock the target away, and now it does knock the target away. Not sure what the purpose is behind that. Not sure who asked for it, but hey, I guess we'll take it. And then we also have Quinn as well getting adjusted. So Quinn is getting a nudge towards jungle viability. So her passive gains a flat 50 bonus damage against monsters, and her Q now does 50% more damage to monsters. So both meaningful improvements to her clear speed and consistency. And then her ultimate mana cost was also reduced, essentially helping her overall mana sustain in the jungle. Now, this will, of course, also help in terms of roaming from top or mid lane as well. So really nice overall adjustments for Quinn. So be on the lookout for Quinn Jungle this next patch. In terms of system buffs, so Lichbane gets more AP ratio on its Spellblade passive from 40 to 45%, and a bigger movement speed bonus from 4 to 6%. So the movement speed in particular is very nice. It helps AP assassins and split pushers stick to targets after using their burst combo, and makes roaming mages feel snappier. So if you play something like TF, Echo, or Akali who might build this item, it just got quite a bit better. We also have Storm Raider Surge. So Storm Raider Surge is getting a substantial buff, so the movement speed duration extends from 3 to 4 seconds, and the actual move speed bonus jumps from 40% for melee to 48%, and then 30% ranged up to 36% for ranged. So what this means is overall, you're getting a net buff of about 60% more total distance from Storm Raider Surge. So you will feel this immediately when you're chasing down kills or escaping after a combo. So burst champions and assassins who already ran this rune are going to love it, and expect to see it a bit more frequently. Now we also have some changes to Doran's bow and Doran's helm. So Doran's bow getting an attack damage buff from 6 to 8, and Doran's helm getting a health bonus of 110 up to 130. So the goal here is very straightforward. Riot wants starting item choice to actually feel like a decision. For too long, players have been defaulting to the same opener on every champion, regardless of matchup, because the alternatives didn't really feel worth it. So these bonuses might not feel like much, but they will have a big impact on the laning phase. Now let's talk a little bit about system nerfs. So Deathfire Touch, the early game damage on this rune did get pulled back a little and now deals 3 DPS at level 1 instead of 4, but still scales up to 12 DPS at level 18. So our graphic here, you can kind of see it does start at lower damage at level 1, but overall by the time you get all the way to 18, it's still the old Deathfire Touch rune, right? You still get the same damage output. So this is specifically targeted at how oppressive the rune feels the first few levels, where that extra tick of damage was pretty frustrating in terms of poke. So Riot kind of scaling that back a little. We also have a Gluttonous Greaves. So Gluttonous Greaves are getting hit from 2 angles, so they're 50 gold more expensive. And Omnivamp stacks are changing a little bit on the Greaves as well. So now you need 10 stacks to reach the same 6% Omnivamp, with each stack giving 0.6%. So the cap is identical, but getting there does take significantly longer, which basically is very similar to Deathfire Touch. It's just weaker early, and you're not going to get your full value until you have really committed to the fight. So if you've been relying on these boots to sustain a little bit early, expect to feel a difference there. We also have Black Cleaver and Deathfire Touch that's coming in 2611. We talked about this earlier. There is still time to abuse it. If you do play a champion that would utilize both of these. I mean, it's really strong against people who would stack armor in the early game or just had a very high base armor. So what they're going to be doing to change this is they're going to be adding an internal cooldown to prevent the combo from proccing as freely. I believe people were running this on like Renekton and Darius. I don't know exactly the details that are coming for this, but just kind of keep that in mind. We will be seeing some changes to this combo here very soon. We'll cover that when we get more info on 2611. All right, guys, that's going to be the end of this video. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. See you guys in the next one.